What up, perps? Kid Copious back in effect. Purple State Party, you know what we're doing here. We're repping America, the center, and common sense, and always keeping love in your heart. It is very important. You gotta lead with love. That's, kind of my guiding principle. So let's get into some quick bites here really quick. So I came across this on Instagram from PragerU. Voting to let men compete in women's sports while pretending to be pro-woman is like a fascist calling himself Antifa. Yeah, this is kind of coming back up because here in California there was a track meet. There was a biological male competing against the women. And he shattered the long jump record by 8 feet. Yeah. Even Gavin Newsom struggles with this. He contextualizes it that we need to think about this individual's feelings and how it feels to be excluded. Well, part of that is just BS because this biological male is not being excluded. This biological male wants to be the only guy on a female team. What's wrong with him being a female on the guys' team? What's wrong with the whole idea of, sure, treat him like he's a female off the field, but on the field, he's still what he is. I don't understand how that's exclusionary. I don't understand how that's denying a person their truth. I don't see it that way. What I see it is that people are using loopholes to make themselves feel better, to take away opportunities from girls and say that it's some sort of progress is just an absolute crock of shit. So Donald Trump went on X and sent out a tweet. And he started it by saying, Shalom, Hamas. That means hello or goodbye. Your choice. And he went on to say that they need to return the hostages or there'll be consequences, and they need to return the dead bodies. And what kind of sickos keep dead bodies? This is a very welcome change. It's time that we start calling these terrorist organizations what they are, terrorist organizations. If you offend members of the moderate Islamic Muslim community by calling out people like Hamas, that's on those people. That's their choice to be offended by that. It reminds me of the mob show Sopranos and how there were a lot of Italian Americans who sort of protested about the depiction of Italians. And being Italian myself, I didn't see that. These were criminals. These were not Italians. This is Hamas. These are not Muslims. If you don't divorce yourself from it, then you are lumped in with it. And speaking of being lumped in with it, President Trump recently had his address to Congress in which a lot of the Democrats showed up with their little Wile E. Coyote signs, hashtag resist, as Bronco shows here in a cartoon. And the psychiatrist is looking at the donkey saying, is the evil orange man in the room with us now? And on his notepad, he wrote, TDS is real. When you hold up signs that talk about, Elon steals or end Doge, what are you saying? Are you saying that, like, you're for government waste? But, like Trump said, the Democrats wouldn't cheer for him even if he ended world hunger and war, And they were out there with their little Wile E. Coyote signs, trying to make a point, looking like children, disrupting the address. It's no different than when Marjorie Taylor Greene and Brobert and some of the other Republicans, would heckle Biden. It's not classy. But, in the case of the Democrats, their opposition to Doge, and I get it, Doge is taking credit for things that they shouldn't have taken credit for. They've been braggadocious. They've done a lot of stuff wrong. But, we'll get into a little more of that later. But at the core of what Doge is trying to do is look at the books and see where all the money is going and sort of expose, the fact that we have so much government waste. And even worse than that, and we'll touch on this more later, is the fact that there's no oversight on a lot of these expenditures. When we send money abroad, we don't know where the money goes. Nobody asks for receipts. We just hand them a big giant check from the taxpayers of America and say, well, have at it. And we don't know. We don't know if some of our programs end up funding terrorism or if they end up funding things that we really don't want to be funding. And to stand up and be against that simply because you don't like the guy in charge, well, you're kind of signaling to the American people, you were right not to vote us back into power. We are a bunch of radical far leftists. We offer conflicting views. We offer all of these ways to feel good and waste money. But at the end of the day, we're going to tank the country. I mean, that's just the way I see it. We'll touch more on his address to Congress in a minute. So, I'm not one of these people who makes, celebrities out of politicians or political people or whatever, pundits. So I don't know who this guy is, Joey Monorino. But I like the point that he brought up here in a post. The governor of New York is now going to sue Trump in court to make sure she could charge New Yorkers $9 a day to drive in their own city. And she's bragging about doing that. Then Democrats wonder why they lost the election. Yeah, and this is that TDS, this Trump derangement syndrome, where somehow it's come to be that Democrat politicians simply have to take on Trump to excite their voting base. And I really, I saw it the same way with Trump. I see it on both sides. Red and blue both play this game. But we're talking about this one right now, where, the governor wants to charge people to go into their own city to reduce the congestion, right? But who gets penalized? The people who can't afford $9 a day. Now they have to take the bus. Now they have to take the subway. Now they have to inconvenience their lives, while the rich people who, admittedly end up polluting the planet more because they've got bigger houses, bigger air conditioning, bigger cars, more cars, flying jet planes, all of that kind of crap. $9 a day doesn't really matter much to them. So again, if you're going to put yourself out there as the party of the people or, the underdogs or whatever, why do you pass laws that penalize them? You want to tax the rich, but then you penalize the poor. That's the kind of mixed messaging that really needs to end on both sides. But primarily right now, it is a Democrat issue. So I found this clip. This was on the Larry Elder show. You can agree, disagree with Larry Elder all you want. I for one am sort of a fan. But he posted this. This is from Thomas Sowell, a very wise man, who brings up the point. More whites were brought as slaves to North Africa than blacks brought as slaves to the United States or the 13 colonies from which it was formed. White slaves were still being bought and sold in the Ottoman Empire decades after blacks were freed in the United States. And why is this important? It's important for the same reason that we realize that back in the day, there were black slave owners. There were black people who owned black people. And the reason why this is important to remember is because there was a lot of talk about reparations. Now, I'm not trying to cover up for slavery. It was horrible. It was wrong. It was what they did back then. And if it set black people back, well, I have no problem seeing that. But the idea of reparations doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Because nowadays, we don't have slavery here. We do still have slavery around the world. We have human traffickers who are enslaving young girls to be sex slaves and streaming across the border and back and forth and Epstein's List and all of that kind of crap. And nobody seems to pay attention to that. And that's, again, one of those mixed messages that comes out of the blue camp, that they want reparations for black people, but they don't really do much about the actual slaves that are living today. And we need to be reminded of our true history so that the political parties can't use it against us. That's one of the things that we see that in American politics that to me is so destructive is the fact that both parties have figured out the key topics to lock people into place. We'll get into that a little bit more, but I really like Thomas Sowell. I like the wisdom that he brings. And I like the fact that that as a black man, him and Larry Elder and many like him, can speak the truth in this country. And that's one of the things about America. We are allowed to, speak our minds. All around the world right now, we're seeing a clampdown on people's posts and memes. And yeah, a lot of them are ugly, and a lot of them, you could argue do deserve to be punished. But we need to have freedom of speech, because if we allow the media to control every single narrative, then we're not going to be reminded of things like Thomas Sowell reminds us here. That, slavery wasn't just as black and white as history wants to paint it now. Sometimes, there was an ugly truth that needs to be seen. Well, something to consider at least. So when I stopped doing YouTube videos and started doing the podcast, I took that opportunity to kind of change things up a bit. I wanted to start bringing some of the weird stuff that I run across on the internet, stuff that I think is actually beneficial. And I guess this is the one I landed on first. Chewing wood could give your brain an unexpected boost. This is by Health Magazine. What they're talking about here is some researchers in South Korea, excuse me. North Korea, that would be odd. But anyhow, what they said here is many people chew gum, of course, which is softer but arguable and more palatable than wood. Previous research has shown that chewing gum, in fact, significantly increases brain activity. Getting the brain's blood supply pumping seems to improve a variety of cognitive functions, it seems. Curiously, clinical evidence also suggests people who find chewing a challenge also tend to have lower cognitive function and higher mental impairment. So they don't really understand what chewing gum, how that affects the brain, why it makes it work better. So these researchers set out to do it. In a new study, researchers investigated one possible explanation involving oxidative stress in neurological tissue, which is believed to play a pivotal role in the decline of cognitive function. Wouldn't that be great if we could end cognitive decline in elders? It would make things a lot easier. Several metabolic processes produce harmful molecules known as reactive oxygen species, which can cause cumulative oxidative damage in the human brain. Whoa! One of the brain's best defenses against oxidative stress is an antioxidant called glutathione, GSH. Glutathione, I can't pronounce these words, which holds many important jobs throughout the body, including protecting neurons from reactive oxygen species. Whoa! This is way over my head. But basically what they're saying is that when you chew, when you're chewing on wood or gum or something like that, it stimulates blood flow and it raises these glutathione levels. Okay? So they took 52 students in Daegu, South Korea, and gave half of them gum, half of them wood to chew on. They chewed for 5 minutes while they used magnetic resonance spectroscopy to measure glutathione levels in their anterior cingulate cortex, a key brain region for cognitive control, before and after chewing. All subjects took a cognitive test before and after it. Chewing significantly boosted glutathione levels in subjects' brains, let's cut out the big words, especially in the wood chewing group. Combined with the rise from the cognitive test, the rise in glutathione, what? There you go. In other words, those who chewed wood had larger glutathione boost and also performed better on the test. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first report indicating that maceration can alter the level of antioxidants in the human brain. Well, the long and short of this is, chew gum, chew on pencils, I guess. That's going to be easy for me. I chew on everything. I chew on metal styluses for my phone, for God's sakes. But this is a very interesting scientific study because it shows how science works. You find this thing like chewing wood raises certain levels, which means people perform better on tests. So how do we raise those levels without necessarily chewing on pencils every single day or 24/7 or whatever you'd have to do to maintain these levels? But it gives scientists a roadmap, a piece of a roadmap to move forward. And, I kind of find that stuff fascinating. But, yeah, I'll put this up. I'll put the article up probably on Instagram. So if you want to read it, you can just head over there when we're done here. All right, we're going to get into bees. Not the little things that fly around and collect honey, but the letter B. We're going to start with borders. And surprisingly, we're not going to talk about the U.S. border. We're going to talk about some of the borders in Europe and the fact that people over there are panicking. But at the same time that they're panicking, because of the way Trump's dealing with the Ukraine situation right now, which I think I explained last week. You have to put Zelensky in his place. The only way this deal is going to get done is if you make Putin look good and you rein in the kind of demands that the Ukraine is going to make, because it's just the way the negotiation is going to have to go. But because of that, a lot of European countries are a little bit edgy right now. They're realizing maybe they can't rely on the U.S. to protect them. I personally don't think that's true, but if it spurs them into action over there to start spending more on their military and taking their own defense, into their own hands instead of relying on us, I think that's ultimately a good thing. So anyhow, one of these German dudes was talking, and he brought up the point, we should try to be the allies that people want to be allied with. It's very true. Very true with what's going on over there. For too long, since the end of World War II, everybody has just assumed that the United States is sheltering Europe. And, it's time for them to shelter themselves. Some guy in a Polish government made a really good point. Why should 300 million Americans protect 500 million Europeans against 140 million Russians? And over in Lithuania, they're starting to fortify their own border, putting up anti-tank barriers. And now Germany is going to release they had some, what's the word that I'm looking for? They had some rules in place that only allowed them to spend a certain amount of money on military, defense, infrastructure, things like that. And they're loosening these rules because they realize that they have to be able to stand on their own. And that's one of the effects I think Trump is having around the world, is he's making people take a step back and figure out, how are we going to do this without the U.S.? And in doing that, they can improve their countries. But it's not like the U.S. is just going to abandon its allies over there. That's a favorite talking point right now for the left. We're not abandoning anybody. The truth of the matter is that if we continue to firmly plant ourselves on Ukraine's side and constantly belittle and threaten Russia, we're never going to get a peace deal. And that's what Europe needs to realize. That's what the left needs to realize. Trump's tactics are going to work. They seem shaky at first. They seem dubious at first. But somehow these things have a way of working out, because these are negotiations, and he's good at negotiating. The last 4 years, we had a president who only wanted to condemn Russia, only wanted to restrain Israel, wanted to contextualize so many of the problems around the world. It's nice to see that we have a president now who's just calling it for what it is. It's a mess over in the Ukraine, and the only way it's going to end is if we can broker a deal between Russia and the Ukraine. And the only way to do that is to not be so pro-Ukraine. It sounds weird, but that's just the way it has to be. All right, so another obvious B has got to be the Bidens and what they've been up to. Yeah, the prodigal son here, Hunter Biden, his lawsuit is in jeopardy after rental home damage in Palisades fire and financial woes mount. Citing financial problems, Hunter Biden this week has asked a federal judge to drop the laptop hacking lawsuit he filed against a former Trump administration aide, saying that he no longer has the financial resources to pursue the case. Yeah, because he's broke. His income has declined significantly since the lawsuit was filed, he wrote. His rental home was also damaged in the Palisades fire in January, which further exacerbated his money challenges. Biden's income had primarily come from the sales of his artwork and his memoir, according to his declaration. In the few years before December 23, Biden said he sold 27 pieces of art at an average price of $54,000. But since then, he's only sold one piece for $36,000, and his book sales have declined. Gee, I wonder why. Could it be that everybody was buying his artwork to buy favor with Biden? Oh, and I can hear you out there saying, oh, that's illegal. Buying influence is illegal. Yeah, okay, sure. We'll roll with that. That's what was going on. Nobody was buying it because it was good art. Nobody was buying his book because they really wanted to know the life and times of Hunter Biden. Come on. This guy was a crack fiend, man. We already... Oh, my God. But, yeah, he broke. And his dad has re-signed with Hollywood talent agency CAA. I don't really know why. I suppose for CAA's point of view, if he's going to make any money, they want a chunk of it. But I don't really see Joe going out on the speaking circuit. That was one of the things that led to him not being reelected. In fact, removed, was the fact that he just couldn't speak any longer. And I'm not going to poke fun at him for that, but that's the truth. I don't know what his career is going to hold from here on out. Well, I guess that's what you do when you leave the Oval Office. You sign with a talent agency, and they get you speaking gigs. So the next beat we're going to cover here, oddly enough, is blood. You might think, where in the heck is Kid going to go with this? Well, part of the new look around this place is I want to bring forth, a little bit of positivity. This is about an Australian man, prolific blood donor who saved 2.4 million babies, dies at 88. I saw that headline and I thought, how could he do, this is coming from NBC News. An Australian man credited with saving more than 2 million babies through decades of regular blood and plasma donations has died at 88. His name was James Harrison, and he has an antibody in his blood that's used to make a medication called anti-D, which is given to pregnant women whose blood might attack their unborn babies. And without it, the babies may develop hemolytic disease of the fetus and newborn, it's hard for me to say that word, HDFN, a blood disorder that can be fatal. So they're making antibodies out of this guy's blood. So what it is when a woman has RN negative blood and her unborn baby has RN positive blood, her body will often attack the baby like a foreign invader. God, that sucks. Activating an autoimmune response, which can result in brain damage and often death, also known as a miscarriage. And the only way to treat it is through blood transfusions. And Mr. Harrison and people like him, there's not a lot of them, but there are some, their blood is used to make the antidote to that. Despite his aversion to needles, Harrison began donating in 1954 at the age of 18, keeping a promise he made at 14 when he received a life-saving blood transfusions as part of a major surgery. A decade later, it was found that his blood contained an antibody essential for producing anti-D injection. Known as the man with the golden arm, Harrison donated his blood and plasma 1,173 times, never missing an appointment for more than 60 years until he retired in 2018 at the age of 81. He said before he passed, "I hope it's a record that somebody breaks because it means that they're dedicated to the cause." To donate the amount of blood that he had to give, nurses would take the blood out of his body, remove the plasma where the antibodies were, and return the blood to him. That's the kind of process that this man had to go through. His daughter, Tracy Mellowship, who also received anti-D, said Harrison was a humanitarian at heart, adding that her family may not have existed without his precious donation. Yeah, his own granddaughter had that condition and was saved because of his blood. That's crazy. I mean, that is really, those are the kind of people that often go unheralded in this world. Some Australian guy who just goes in every week, basically, and donates his blood to save the lives of babies. And it was around the world. And I just thought that was incredible. And, those are the kind of stories that restore our faith in humanity. And I think that's something we need right now. We really do. Let's move on to the last B on the list here, Boondoggles. Who benefited? Blue state lawmaker demands FBI investigate bullet train boondoggle. This is coming from Fox News. GOP Representative Kevin Kelly said the FBI has a responsibility to look into the project. Of course, we're talking about the California bullet train. No rail has been constructed since the project kicked off 17 years ago. And the projection that could cost $100 billion above previous estimates raises red flags. As Kylie says, the malfeasance leads to questions that transcend mere incompetence. How is it possible to have spent over $13 billion without a single station opening? Where have these funds gone? Who benefited? Because the project has consumed billions in federal funding, the FBI has both the authority and, I would argue, the responsibility to pursue these questions and deliver answers to the American people. The Public Integrity Division is uniquely qualified to root out any corruption, recover stolen funds, and restore confidence that our tax dollars are being stewarded carefully. And, that's a huge issue right now. Where in the hell are our tax dollars going? Because we're seeing it, during Trump's speech. He brought up some of the stuff that Doge is putting an end to. Now, we can argue about Doge's methods and their braggadocious attitudes and stuff, but this is some of the stuff that they've exposed. And this is important information because we need to know where our money's going. $22 billion went from Health and Human Services to provide free housing and cars for illegal aliens, people who weren't supposed to be here. $45 million for DEI scholarships in Burma. $40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants, whatever that is. We spent $8 million to promote LGBTQ issues in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody's heard of. Well, I have. It's in the middle of South Africa. It's like the whole city's like 3,300 feet in the air. It's a crazy place. We spent $8 million making mice transgender. We spent $32 million for left-wing propaganda in Moldova. $10 million for male circumcision in Mozambique. This is where some of our money is going. $20 million for the Arab Sesame Street? Come on. If they want it, they can make it themselves. We just gave $1.9 billion to Stacey Abrams and her newly created Decarbonization of Homes Committee. What the hell that means? What is $3.5 million consulting contract for lavish fish monitoring? What are these boondoggles? We spent $1.5 million for voter confidence in Liberia. $59 million for illegal alien hotel rooms in New York City. We spent $250,000 to increase vegan local climate action initiatives in Zambia. And silly enough, $47 million for improving learning outcomes in Asia. Like Trump said, Asia's doing very well with learning. Don't know what we're doing. We should use it ourselves. And then $101 million for DEI contracts at the Department of Education. That doesn't make any sense. And yes, this is all U.S. aid money. This is all supposed to be making the U.S. look better around the world. But where is the oversight on this? Where is the logic and the common sense in this? People came into our country illegally, and we took taxpayer dollars to house, clothe, feed, give them cars, give them cell phones. That's a boondoggle. The last 4 years has been a boondoggle. The last 4 years under the Biden administration, we got stuff like men menstruate. We got pregnant people. We got non-binary women. We got biological males competing in women's sports and literally taking away opportunities from women. We had a foreign policy that seemed to be, well, Hamas really isn't that bad, and we have to consider what Israel did. I'm glad the boondoggle's starting to come off. People will say that Trump's a boondoggle. I don't buy it. I don't see it that way. I think he's calling it as it is on the field, so to speak. And, I'm positive about the way we're moving forward. I think we've got some tough times on the horizon, though. I don't think it's in all change overnight. I really don't. But, one thing that we could see very clearly right now is that the red and blue parties have pinned us into our little corners, or people into their corners, because I'm not pinned into a corner. All right? I believe what I want to believe, and I vote the way I want to vote. But doesn't it seem like our politics have boiled down to you're either pro-life or pro-choice? and there is no middle ground. That's what I'm trying to bring forth here. The idea that we can have a middle ground. We don't have to have third parties that are just more extreme than the original parties. But these two parties need to essentially go away. We need more. In researching some of the German quotes, I noticed how many different political parties they have. And you look at places like Sweden and how many parties they have. We have two. And neither one of them is doing a good job. You know, Trump is trying to right a ship that was really wobbly after Biden. But at the same time, some of the ways that he's going about it and other Republicans are going about it is just as nasty. And it's just as diluted. For better or worse, what we've seen lately is the warts of the Democrats and the Republicans. After Roe versus Wade was rescinded, we saw Republicans outlawing abortion, which I think is a horrible idea. We spent 4 years of an administration trying to convince us the economy wasn't as bad as we were feeling, that the border wasn't a crisis, that upwards of 14 million illegal migrants coming into this country wasn't a bad idea, that, Hamas really isn't that bad, and we need to think about the people of Palestine. But we've seen these people, warts and all now, all right? And it's time. It is time for everybody to become more purple and to set aside that one little issue that's locking you in place and realizing that we may have to give up something to win the bigger fight. And that is what Purple State is all about. It is about compromise. And in compromise, sometimes you have to give up to get something. That's the way it is. That's what's going on with the Russian-Ukraine negotiations right now. Zelensky's going to have to give up something. That's just the bottom line. And if people can't just see it for what it is, living here in California, and we're talking about the bullet train. And the fact that if you are, left-leaning, if you're a Democrat, if you voted for Gavin Newsom, you're being forced to accept men and girls sports. You're forced to accept handing out free money to illegal immigrants. You have to accept sanctuary cities. You have to accept the boondoggles of the bullet train because you want to keep abortion legal. And I understand that. I want to keep abortion legal. I'm very much pro-choice. But we're slaves to these political parties based on one or two ideals that we believe in. And that's how they're keeping us in line. And that's my mission here. My mission here is to raise up people who no longer simply vote for a person because of the letter next to their name or because they agree on 2 things but disagree on 8 things. That's what we need to move towards as American citizens. We need to look past what we agree with and look at what we disagree with. We need to vote for the person who is agreeing with us on what we disagree with. Look at the last 4 years. The Biden administration told us that we weren't seeing the good economy, that the border wasn't in crisis, that there were nuances to the Hamas attack, and that we must support Ukraine no matter what. And that was very, very detrimental to this country and to the world. The war in the Ukraine needs to end. Government boondoggling needs to end. And our allegiance to 2 parties? Are you kidding me? In the United States of America, there are only 2 groups that viably represent the people? I don't get it, man. I think Purple State could be the one party that satisfies everybody's needs, but it's going to take compromise. That's the problem. That's what's lacking in our political system right now. Compromise. It's all about fighting the other person. And really, I'm getting tired of it. I'm hopeful for the future because I think the curtains are being pulled back. And once they're pulled back, we'll be able to see the truth. And once we see the truth, maybe then we can move forward with clarity. I'm Kid Copious. I'm Purple State Party, and so are you. Love one another. Keep on grinding. It's the only way to get ahead. And you know what? When you need that moment of pause, put on some music and dance it out.